What's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with a Martial Artist. Today is a slightly interesting one, particularly for you MMA fans. We're going to look at it at a slightly different angle. My guest is a martial artist. He's a jiu-jitsu practitioner. But primarily, I've got him on to talk about the MMA scoring system. He's an MMA official. We talk loads about the rules, some of the things going on behind the scenes, things that people don't understand and misconceptions. And it's a topic that I know is very controversial and very, very popular at the moment. So Mike is a fantastic expert on that subject. He's got loads of insights to provide to us, and hopefully you'll find it as interesting as I did. Before we start, please make sure you are supporting the podcast just with a little subscription, whatever platform you're on, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. It's all at CWAMA podcast. Give us a follow. It's totally free and a very good way to support the channel's growth. And without further ado, I will let you listen to Mike and some of the interesting bits that we get talking about. All right. Well, I reckon let's dive in.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you very much for being here, giving up your time, especially in the evenings after work. But I thought it would be really interesting to have you on. Because you've got a very different angle of something that I find very interesting. I'm sure there's some other dorks out there that will find it interesting too, about the MMA officiating route. Because obviously you've got background and you train, and that's how we first met. But I thought it was an interesting conversation to have, and already off camera we're talking about a few things which I found fascinating. But I guess first of all, how did you get into, well, let's start martial arts. Let's keep it broad first. Like, where did that come from for you?
So martial arts as a whole came for me. So I started in combat sports 35 years ago, whenever it was. I was just a wee bairn. We had some new neighbours moving across the road for us. So my dad was a big rugby fan, always into rugby, forced us down the rugby route from a very young age. My brother was the favourite, obviously, because my brother's 5 years older than me. My dad coached him at rugby, and I was always left, and this is no disrespect to her, but I was always left with my mum on the sidelines. And then when I got old enough, like 4 to 5 years old, I was then allowed to start training with the under 6s. I was quite a big kid, so they stuck me in with the under 6s, but I was like 4 coming on 5 with a load of 5 to 6 year old kids.
Yeah. At that age, I guess there's a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, different mentality, like maturity, I suppose, more than anything else. Not size, not strength, not anything like that. More of a maturity thing. I didn't really like it. It wasn't for me. I didn't really like rugby that much. It was the only reason I did it was because of my dad and my brother. So I did, but it just really wasn't for me.
But you were just doing it,
Yeah. But then, as I started to get a bit older, we had a family moving across from us, Cashes, and Felix was a bare knuckle boxer. And so they moved in, and after a little while, they knocked the house down, rebuilt it all. And Felix put in his garage, he put a punch bag, a heavy bag. And I remember him being out there one day, just in his pants and a vest, decimating this heavy bag.
Very bare knuckle boxer.
Yeah. He was absolutely smashing this heavy bag to pieces. And I was just fascinated watching how he moved, how he went about it. And at the time, as like a 6-7 year old kid, I'm into Ninja Turtles. Yeah. I'm into the Karate Kid. I'm into all of this sort of stuff. You'd have all the heroes in your favourite cartoons would know a form of martial art. So that was my real first introduction in person to martial arts themselves, or combat sports. Sorry, my mum tried to get me into karate. As a kid that was one of the bigger kids in the class, not just like size-wise, but also height-wise. I'd be put up against kids, and we would be doing the moves back and forth across the hall. I'd be letting them hit me, and as soon as it was my time, they'd like run across the hall. Sure. And I'd get like 1 or 2 like goes at the technique before they've run back across the hall. So I'd get frustrated with that it just wasn't, it always felt like, because I was a bigger kid, it always felt like I was going against older kids.
Right, yeah.
So the maturity level was always there. So that's why, like, my brother was older than me, my sister was a lot older than me as well. So it was always thinking that I was hanging around with older kids. I was always, whatever clubs I was in, I was always put in with older kids as well. So it made me grow up a little bit more in that aspect.
Yeah.
But from a martial arts perspective, again, the maturity level for someone who's a lot younger but of a similar size, it was a lot harder for me because I didn't really understand it as much. Carried on a bit with boxing, went boxing with, so Felix had, at the time he had two sons, Miley and Andy, and we'd go boxing with Miley and Andy, we'd box in the garden, we'd do whatever we were doing. Miley was really good, real talented young lad as far as a boxer was concerned. His youngest brother's actually Felix Cash, the boxer. He's European, I think he is now European. It might have been like European or Commonwealth champion or somewhere around that.
Cool.
Real good boxer. But that was really me. I was getting into boxing, and then, as I say, would watch all the martial art films. My dad and my granddad were really into boxing as well. My granddad, I'd stay around my nan and granddad's house, and like Nassim Ahmed would be on the telly, and
cool.
me and Tommy, my granddad, would be sitting there watching that, or would sit there and watch Frank Bruno Tyson, where Tyson just decimated Bruno for the title.
Yeah.
Nigel Benn.
The big names, like that era.
It was beautiful. Really good era of boxing. So we'd watch all through that. I watched it probably up to maybe like Lennox Lewis. I started to tail off a bit with Lennox Lewis. Once the Klitschko's really took over heavyweight boxing, I wasn't really interested in that so much in boxing itself. Then I went to, when I was at college, I started going to clubs and pubs as well. So I was like 16, 17, started going to the pubs, started going to the clubs, started talking to everybody, and always fascinated me, like the door stuff and all that sort of stuff. I suppose being a salesperson, it came from a young age. I always wanted to know people. I always wanted to get contacts, created contacts, find people and speak to them. And I was like 17, and I was outside the local club in Staines, and the doorman were just slinging a guy out. And this other guy, who was friends with the doorman, out of nowhere just did a spinning heel kick and like completely separated this guy from his senses. He's unconscious on the floor, out. And then he goes, "Sorry guys, I've got to go, I'm on bail." And then just dived off. Everyone else is, "Oh my God, have you seen that? He's on bail, like he's hit this guy." I was like, that was the coolest shit I've ever seen. Like, that was everything that I'd ever seen. Everything I've ever seen in these karate movies and kung fu movies. Like, he's just done it in real life. In real life. I managed to track him down through one of the doormen. Found out that he was actually he was a coach. I'm not going to go into any more details because just in case the police are still looking for a random guy in the late 90s who's spinning heel kicked someone outside a nightclub. So I went along with them for a little bit just to find out what was going on.
Cool.
And got into it. Started going to a couple of shows. So I went to. I think the first MMA show I went to, it was called No Holds Barred because MMA was still really. UFC had already come out at this point, so this was like 2001. Went along to Millennium Brawl at the High Wycombe Judo Centre, Millennium Brawl 2, I think it was.
Cool.
My mate Danny Brennan was fighting on the show, so I got tickets, and a few of us all went and watched him, and it was a great night. In the main event, Lee Murray was fighting in the main event. Wow. I want to say. There was a couple of other like names that people would go, "Oh wow, like that person fought this show." It was, I think Mark Weir might have fought on it as well, or at least he was on the Millennium Brawl shows. Like Millennium Brawl was one of the more better known regional shows. It was quite a big show for where it was. And when I say it was quite big, it's because there wasn't many around.
Yeah, well, that's my understanding as well. There wasn't a huge amount until even relatively recently. So it's now sort of.
It exploded quite a few years ago, but like in the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot at all. The best person, there's the two best people to talk to about shows, or three best people to talk to about shows from that sort of era. Brad Wharton, Ben Cartledge, and Andy Sledge. Like, those guys know so much about like early MMA and like just encyclopedias of that. There's others that do as well. There's others that do as well. I'm not going to take it away from anybody else, but those sort of guys, they knew so much. They know so much about MMA and the history of MMA from that point of view. If you want to know anything about Dutch MMA from the 2000s onwards, Brad Wharton is your man. He's your man. Who
very specific. He
knows his stuff, and MMA really from that point of view. I then sort of fell out of love with. I didn't fall out of love with MMA.
Yeah.
I fell in love with drinking lots and not really doing anything. So I had a little dabble in it. I disappeared for a few years. And then I was working in the pub trade at the time. So I was a pub manager. I was working around different places, antisocial hours. Drinking was a good way of forgetting that you had to work in a pub for 60, 70 hours a week. And then in 2007, I decided to come out of late 2006, I decided to come out of the pub trade. 2007, I got a job for a company selling safety equipment. I was a shop manager, and we sold safety equipment, site safety supplies, first aid, footwear, clothing, that sort of stuff. And that's when I started to fall back in love again with training. So I started going back to the gym, started weight training again, started dipping my toes in a little bit, started going to see a boxing coach just to start sharpening stuff up again, because I realised that I'd gone through a stage of about 6 years of just drinking and partying, and it was all a bit of a blur what was going on in that time. I still had a little bit that was left to come out of me, but by the end of 2007, I'd stopped drinking. I was training. I was training in the gym like 5-6 days a week. I'd go to boxing as well. So
I was full pivot.
Completely different. Stopped drinking and was just started to clean my life up. And that's when it was probably got to about 2009, and I started dipping my toes back into different martial arts. Started going to grappling lessons, started going to little bits around. And then around 2010, early 2010, I started dating my now wife. My friend's boyfriend was training in MMA. We got talking at a party. He said, "Why don't you come along? We're going to start up a new club.
Oh, cool.
Just come and train with us." We turned up to a working man's club in Bracknell. We threw some mats on the floor.
Nice.
And I think we disturbed a load of ringworm and everything else that was on the floor.
All that gross shit.
Threw some beer on it and killed it all. A bit of Stella, just a universal cleaner. And then just started training. So that was early 2010. We started doing that. And then I'd train with them over there on a Sunday morning, sometimes on, I think it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday night as well. And he also trained at a place called Team Mayhem MMA over in Windsor. So then I started going there as well. So I'd start training with them. So I'd do a few sessions with them, I'd do a few sessions with him. I very quickly found out that even though I thought I was a tough guy, I was nowhere near.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I always thought, like when I was growing up in my 20s, I've done a bit of boxing. I've trained. I know what I'm doing. I didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue. And it took to my late 20s to realise. Like, I'd had a couple of hide-ins. I'd had a few fights, and yeah, I thought I realised I wasn't. And so I trained with those guys. Around that time as well, it was late 2009, I tore both my rotator cuffs and dislocated my left shoulder. So I'd absolutely decimated my top half with
that's
movement.
not helpful. Yeah.
And then I started training MMA like more, like 2 or 3 times a week. Plus I was still trying to weight train. And I remember going in for, my right shoulder had healed. My left shoulder was still giving me lots and lots and lots of trouble. So I went in and I had I had an injection in my shoulder. I can't remember what they called it. I had an injection in my shoulder to try and sort it out. And I remember the doctor saying to me, you're gonna, after a week, all the fluid is gonna settle down in your shoulder. Between week 1 and week 8, you're gonna feel like $1,000,000. You're gonna feel like there's nothing wrong. This is just so the pain isn't there, but don't train.
Yeah, don't fuck it up.
Yeah, it's still, your shoulder is still knackered, but you're gonna feel like $1,000,000. So after about 3 weeks, I went back training.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah. I managed to reach, after, it got to about week 7, and I managed to, like, I was benching like 140, 145, thinking, Jesus, like this is amazing. My shoulder's almost back.
I'm back, baby.
Yeah, this is it. I'll give it a couple of weeks and I'll be there. I got caught in a Kimura. Couldn't feel anything because it deadened all the nerves. And I just heard a couple of pops.
Oh,
Jesus, what's that? There was no pain whatsoever, until I tapped. Yeah, thanks, nice one, cheers, bro. And they even said to me, like, what were those pops? Oh, it was nothing. Yeah. I don't feel anything. It's fine. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I'm in fucking agony. Absolutely. I woke up in the middle of the night and went back to the doctor, and he said all the repair that you'd done has now gone.
Yeah, he
like
said,
they didn't. Yeah,
you fucking idiot.
Yeah.
What did I tell you?
He goes, what happened? I don't know. I must have slept
Tripped.
funny. Yeah. I must have slept funny on it. He goes, no. Like, then I told him, and they had to go cortisol. That was it. I had cortisol injections in my shoulder. They had to go back through everything again. They had to start again, and because it was my own fault, he said if it had happened and it wasn't my fault, they would have took me in and done surgery on it straight away. Because it was my fault, they put me back to the start of the queue.
Oh.
And by the time I'd got back through all the protocol again, it had pretty much healed. So I was like, well, we'll just leave it. So I was just doing a bit of physio on it, went to see a few people about it. I actually went back to see my old football coach because he was a retired England football club physio as well.
Okay,
so I went back to see him, Neil. He started doing some work on it, a bit of ultrasound, a couple of other bits to try and fix it. And so I carried on training through it anyway, because I thought I've done it once, might as well just carry on.
In for a penny.
Yeah, that's it. Who needs shoulders? Yeah, I mean at this point I'm like late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
What do I need shoulders for? Yeah. So I went to Neil, he got it all sorted out. But in the middle of this is like mid to late 2011 at this point. I've been going up to UCMMA at the Troxy in London quite a lot because my coach, or one of our coaches, James, he'd won the UCMMA Bantamweight Championship. He beat a guy called Corey Tate. Corey Tate was like the next big thing. He was on the up. James had a bit like a 50-50-ish sort of record, but he took a couple of fights just purely because he took them. He was in the wrong weight class. He was miles too small for the weight classes. He was too inexperienced, but he was a high-level judoka. So he was like, oh, that's cool. But he soon realised the difference between MMA and judo. But he was getting by mostly just on his judo itself. And he did a really, really good grappling session, like masterclass almost, on how to control distance and how to control a person in MMA. Went to a couple of his fights, then started talking to Nick Chapman, because Nick Chapman was only in Aldershot at the time. Quite a few mutual friends. Went to watch Nick fight a few times, and then through Nick, I got to meet a guy called Marc Carlin. And Marc Carlin was a journalist who had who was interested in MMA, took on an MMA fight, and it was, I don't know, I want to say like Death to the Cage or whatever the name was of it.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a journalistic path going from doing nothing to fighting in the cage.
Oh, that's cool.
And unsurprisingly, he got beat up by a guy called Jason Barrett because Jason was a professional MMA fighter. Mark wasn't, and he just got beat up. But he was game as fuck. Like, he was just coming forwards. Yeah. I got speaking to Mark, and Mark was saying, "Oh yeah, I've got a new show coming up called UC MMA Contenders. Are you going to come along?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll come along." He goes, "Do you want to fight on it?" And I'm still like rehabbing a shoulder injury, knowing full well that not only am I rehabbing a shoulder injury, I'm not actually good enough, in my own opinion, to fight. I used my shoulder injury as an excuse. I went, I'm really sorry, Mark, like my shoulder's done, like I can't lift it above my head, I can't do this, I can't do this. And he said, "Well, you know what you're talking about. Do you want to come and judge?" And I went, "Yeah, all right then." He goes, "I'll give you 50 quid and as much Coca-Cola as you want." Done. All right.
Sounds good. Sounds like a good night.
Yeah. It was supposed to be in Reading. So it was the return of Jeremy Bailey. Now, Jeremy Bailey was well known, notorious. He was quite a well-known fighter in stand-up background. Was fighting MMA. It was his return fight. It was supposed to be in Reading. Jeremy's from like Basingstoke, Reading sort of area. It was supposed to be in Reading. 2 weeks before the show, it was at the Hexagon in Reading. They were like, "No, we're not having it. Like, it's going to be the last time MMA was in Reading. There was a big kick-off. We're not having it." So he moved it to Aldershot, and it was at Nick Chapman's gym, Fight Science in Aldershot.
Okay, yeah.
So I went along. It was my first ever show that I was officiating at. So I've turned up. The first couple of fights, they sit me with a guy called Sven Gordon. Sven, lovely guy. He's from Portsmouth sort of way. And then there was two other judges. I can't remember who one of the judges were, but then there was a judge who was he was a restaurant owner in Brighton who knew Mark, and he would always, if people let him judge on their shows, he would then give them free stuff. Like he was almost paying because he wanted to be part of the scene.
Involved.
Yeah, that's it. Like he'd give them free meals or whatever.
That sounds like a good gig.
Yeah. And then he'd also try and get them to come in with people, bring more people in. And I remember sitting there with him, and there was a fight that went off. I can remember one of the fighters, a guy called Uma Kliani. I can't remember who he fought.
To be honest, I'm already blown away with how many names you've got logged in the back.
It's all up there somewhere, yeah. I struggle to remember some of my kids' friends' parents' names, but I can remember stuff from 2011. So Uma took this guy down and was just on top of him. But at one point he was holding and he was just getting punched from the bottom, and the other guy was throwing up submission attempts. At the end of the fight, I hand my chitty in. I've given it to this other guy. This restaurant owner comes mincing around the cage and starts poking his finger in my chest, telling me that I'm a fucking idiot. I don't know what I'm talking about. How have you scored it that way? I said, well, Uma was on top. The other guy was underneath. But the other guy underneath is throwing up submission attempts. He'd attempted 2 or 3 triangles. He was throwing strikes from the bottom, sorry. Uma was knackered. He took him down and just held him because he was tired. And his words to me were, you can't win a fight being on the bottom. You must be stupid. And the whole time he's poking me in the chest, telling me I'm an idiot. I then proceeded to ask him how long he'd been training MMA for, or any combat sports. He said, I don't train in combat sports, but I've been judging for X amount of time. And I went, mate, you're a fucking idiot. And he went, you can't talk to me like that. And I said, have you ever watched any MMA?
Yeah.
Like, you go back through at this point, the last 15 years of MMA, and you'll find numerous times where people have won from the bottom. The whole point, like,
that's the whole Gracie thing.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu was like the Simpsons do the best thing when they were taking the piss out of jiu-jitsu, because the guy just lied on the floor and said, "Come into my guard and face your doom," or whatever it was. But like there was a big thing about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that they were guard players.
Yeah.
Because the American style wrestlers wanted to be on top, but the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guard players wanted to be on the bottom. And this idiot is telling me that you can't win from being on the bottom.
Yeah. A lot of people say it was set up that way so that you're supposed to be able to win from the bottom.
Yeah,
like for the Gracies in the first,
like you look at some of the great guard players in the past. That's their whole game, is being from guard. And so I had a big argument with him. I had an argument with Mark Carlin. Comes over and he was like, "What's going on?" I told him what was going on, and he looked at the guy and he said, "You must be some sort of fucking idiot." And Mark turned around to me and he said, "You're my judge from now on." And I was like,
great.
Bro, cool.
I'm glad your entire career has come out of spite, maybe.
Yeah. Came out of a dodgy shoulder and not being able to follow doctor's orders. That's what it came out of. But so from that point onwards, then there was a couple of weeks later, he had another show down in Brighton. When he did that show for him. And then my gym, or the guys that I was training with at Team Mayhem, I got in contact with Brad, who was the one of the co-promoters. Had a chat with him. He was putting on a show called Too Much Talent, and then there was a couple of other shows that were coming around, IFC and a few others. And I just started speaking to people, started reaching out to people. This is what I've done. This is what I'm doing. This is where I've gone. Kept in contact with Mark Carlin as well quite a lot. So just started going around various different shows.
Sure.
And then it just like started to snowball a bit from there. 2013, I was speaking to Sven again. Like me and Sven were on quite a lot of shows together. And Sven spoke to me at the end of 2013. He said, "Look, there's a show in Portsmouth called Shock and Awe." I was like, "Oh yeah, I know Shock and Awe." He goes, "They're just having a clear out. They've got rid of all of their, like a lot of their officials, and they're bringing in a load of new officials. If you speak to Gareth," he gave me his details. He said, "Speak to this guy. He might have you on." I reached out to him. The first thing he said to me was, "Your experience looks good. Have you done a Marc Godard course?" And I knew of Marc Godard at this point, but I didn't know him. And I said, "I haven't made that." And he said,
and just for anyone listening that doesn't know, Marc Godard is quite a very well known referee now.
Very well known, mate. He's platinum standards. He's in my opinion, Marc's one of the best, if not the best official, like globally from an MMA perspective.
A lot of people say that. To be fair.
He's honestly like what that guy doesn't know, and the passion that he has for the sport. Yeah, it's amazing. There's a couple of others from around the world that people will talk about as well. But in my opinion, my personal opinion,
Marc's the man.
Yeah, Marc is my guru when I come to anything. If I need anything, I'll speak to Marc about it. So I said to him, "Oh, okay, so I need to speak to Marc Godard." And I'd seen Marc on a couple of shows. Outside of that, watched. He was on Cage Warriors. He was on a few other shows as well. So I reached out to Marc, and he had, in a couple of months' time, after I spoke to him, he had an MMA officiating seminar there was the MMA clinic in Angel. So I traipsed on up there on the Saturday. Said to my wife, so luckily enough, I was living in Chertsey at the time, right next to the train station. So I didn't have to, I literally walked out the flat, there's the train station, jumped on the train, got the train all the way up to central London, go to Angel, the MMA clinic in Angel, walk in the door, get speaking to some guy, and he said, "Are you here for anything in particular?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm here for I'm a little bit early, but I'm here for the Marc Godard seminar." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm here for the Marc Godard seminar." He goes, It's not here, mate." And I went, "Are you shitting me?" He goes, No, it's not here." So I pulled my phone out, look on my email. It was on Facebook Messenger actually that I'd sorted it all out with Marc. And it turns out it was on the Sunday. So I'd turned up on the Saturday and it was on the Sunday. I was like, "Oh, shit." So I traipsed all the way home again. We've got plans for the Sunday as well. The missus have got plans on the Sunday. I said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but I've got to go again tomorrow." Like I've just done, I don't know, 15, 20 quid on the train journey today. I've got to go again tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I turn up on the Sunday, said hello to Mark. Mark goes, did you turn up yesterday? So it just so happens that Mark used to do them in Angel the morning after a Cage Warriors event. So he'd do a Cage Warriors event on the Saturday night. Mark lives in the Midlands. So he'd do the Cage Warriors event on a Saturday night, and then he'd do a seminar on the Sunday, or referees judging and officials courses on a Sunday. He goes, did you come here yesterday? I was like, yeah. He goes, yeah, the guys told me, they were laughing about it. I was like, oh, yeah, glad everyone else could laugh about it. But on that course, little did I know. So I'm sitting on the course, he's going through everything, he's talking about it. There was a couple of people that now looking back on it or looking back at it a few years later, I sat next to a guy called Chris Batcheldor. So Chris, he was originally from Woking, that sort of area, very well known in the K1 and Thai scene. He's now one of the most respected Westerners as a K1 and Muay Thai referee.
Oh, cool.
Gets flown out to one championship a couple of times a month. Firefighter, like he's brilliant guy. He's been Thai boxing and kickboxing his whole life. He's really like one of the best K1 and Muay Thai referees outside of Thailand itself.
Cool.
They fly him over. Like as I say, I think if they wanted him, he would be moved out there to work out there. I was also on it with a very good friend of mine now, Dan Movahidi. He was on there. Jackie Appel was on there. There was a couple of others that were on the course as well. But they're guys that ended up being a big part of my life. Like a few years later on, my MMA officiating life. So I did Mark's course. Learned a lot. Like a couple of misconceived ideas around MMA officiating got ironed out in that moment. Some that are still said today. Like so, this is 2014. Mark asked, "Does anybody know what a downed opponent is?"
Oh yeah, this is a controversial one at the moment.
It's controversial now. It's not controversial at all because it's very plain. But at the moment, at the time, somebody put their hand up and said, "Oh, it's 3 points of contact." So Mark said, "Well, do a handstand and let me kick you in the head." And they went, "What?" And he goes, "Well, that's only 2. So both of your hands doing a handstand, you've only got 2 points down."
Yeah.
And then he went on to explain that no, it's anything other than the soles of your feet. So at the time, if a hand was on the floor, fingers, it's a downed opponent. If your knee was down, if your bum was down, if your head was on the floor, you're a downed opponent. But there was a misconstrued idea that having 3 points, so people were saying that has to be both your feet and your hand.
Yeah, because you see people like reaching and like trying to get in the system a bit. Don't you?
Yeah, it's changed another 2 times since.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, it changed 1st of November. It's changed again. So now it's anything other than your hands or your feet. So anything other than the soles of your feet or your hands. So if you have a hand on the floor, it's now no longer a down opponent. So 1 hand, 2 hands, it doesn't matter. If you want to be down, you've got to be down. So you can't
do like the John Jones crawl out.
No, well, you can do it. But you
get
kicked
booted
in the face. Yeah. No, like fingers. So people used to like play. They'd put their fingers down, lift them. Yeah, that all got taken out a little while ago. So little bits were coming through. And he talked to us a lot about the actual MMA judging itself, taking us through the criteria. And as I said to you earlier on, like MMA officiating, and that was really the first time I was playing at it before. I'd read the criteria, I'd read it, oh yeah, I think I understand it, but then it turned out I didn't really understand it at all. Mark went through it all in I don't know, 6 hours. We went through like great detail of what it was.
And is it always like a set thing? Because I know it varied, like I see when I watch UFC, in this state, it's slightly different. And this one, you can do this, and this one, you can't do that.
So it's a strange...
Like where does that come from, what you was running through?
So there's a criteria for judging, there's a criteria for referee, and there's a rule set. The difference being rules are hard and fast, criteria is open to interpretation.
Okay.
So a downed opponent is, under the unified rules of mixed martial arts, a downed opponent is somebody with anything at this moment in time, is anything, anybody with anything other than the soles of their feet or their hands on the floor.
Yeah.
So if you've got both your hands on the floor and both your soles of your feet on the floor, you're not down. If you drop a knee, you're down. If you sit down on your bum, you're down. That's a rule.
Yeah.
The criteria would be the first part of the criteria is effective striking and or grappling.
Okay.
So to one person, and you've got to think that there's only one referee in the cage, but there's 3 judges sitting around it. So you've got 3 people sitting at 3 different angles. Me and you sitting opposite sides of the cage, I may see a jab land and I see the guy's head snap back. You may, but he might have his head, the back of his head
behind,
to you.
Yeah.
All you see is his head move back. You may not know if that jab has landed,
or he's pulled or whatever.
Yes, or he's pulled. Or did he get his hand up in time and it's moved his head back, but it didn't connect fully because his hand was in the way.
Yeah.
So this is what people need to understand. And what do? Do you say, what if for 2.5 minutes of a 5-minute round, somebody's been punching the other guy and kicking the other guy all around the cage, but then for the other 2.5 minutes, somebody's picked him up, slammed him, and threatened with submission attempt after submission attempt after submission attempt for the next 2.5 minutes. Well, striking and grappling have to be scored equally.
Yeah.
So how do you score that? In the layman's terms, they'll look at it and they'll go, ooh, well, he had 2.5 minutes of striking, he had 2.5 minutes of effective grappling. Who do we score it to? Yeah. No matter which way you go, somebody's going to tell you you're wrong.
Yeah.
And the whole point of it is you've got 3 different officials sitting around that cage, all watching it from 3 different angles. There could be, you could have, in between you and the action, there could be you, the referee, the action. So you've got a physical blocker in your way that you can't see. They could be a part of the cage where you've actually got a cage stanchion in the way as well. You might not have, some shows have monitors, so you can watch the monitors. Some shows have big screens, so you can watch the big screens. Some shows don't have any of it. So it all depends where you're sitting.
What the setup is and how much access to that you've actually got.
Yeah, and your opinion on it as well. So we have a lot of MMA officials that come in from a particular background. So you might have somebody that comes in. So for a long time, MMA officials, they were always took on, you've got a BJJ black belt. Oh, you must know about MMA. Come and be an MMA judge.
Right.
And then we were getting a lot of decisions that were heavily favoured towards grappling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because they may never have took an introduction to boxing class in their entire life. Then you may get a Thai boxer or somebody that's trained predominantly in the striking arts come along that has no idea about the ground game whatsoever. But they've been asked to judge. Because actually we've got a BJJ judge. We need a striking judge.
Yeah, sure.
We've got a grappler. We need a striker. So they bring in one grappling judge, one striking judge. So that round that I've just described to you, the striking judge is going to heavily favour the striking. The grappling judge is going to heavily favour the grappler.
Yeah.
Because that's what they know.
Yeah.
They know that the grappling judge knows if he's spent 20 seconds taking that guy down and he's grinding him against the cage and he's took him down and he's doing this, he's got back up again, but then he's picked him up and he's slammed him. How much effort does it take to slam it? Also, how much energy does it take out of somebody being slammed and constantly having to get another person off of you of a similar size? Yeah. I've got to get them off me, I've got to stand up. How much energy does that take? Their power bar is coming down. But the striking guy is going, oh, look at that, those leg kicks were beautiful. Yeah. But the grappling guy goes, he's only kicking him in the leg.
Yeah.
It's not hurting him.
Yeah.
But from somebody that in the time, like at this point, I'd done some grappling. I dabbled in striking arts across the year, but I was a student of the game. I watched all of it. I understood, maybe not to the level of some of the others, but I understood the levels.
Yeah, what's going on.
Yeah, so it really, and that's when it really started to take off for me. It was 2014, and then got on to shock and awe. as well as a couple of other shows, Dynamite Fight Series. My coach at the time, I was training kickboxing with a guy called Pete Mercer. He had Dynamite Fight Series, which was a K1 and MMA show. Had a bit of boxing in there as well, so I was working on his show. Gradually started working around and around. It was about 2014 that I met Dan Movahidi, late in 2014, early 2015. I met Dan Movahidi again. And we just started talking. He was asking me about what I was doing, like judging wise and officiating wise. We were talking. I'd meet up with him every once in a while on shows, carrying on through. And then about 2017, I was working a show with Dan. And he said to me, 2016 it was, sorry. He said, we need someone for a show that's coming down. It's predominantly a northern-based show. They're going to do a first show in London. We've got 2 shows on the same night, but we'd like any chance you can cover us on this show. It's going to be their first show in London. I said, yeah, of course. There was me and a couple of others. We've covered this show from a judging perspective and a refereeing perspective. And I must have had really positive feedback go to Dan. Dan's contacted me and he goes, oh, Mike, really well done, great, thank you very much. We've got another show in a couple of weeks' time that we've had a judge pull out on. Do you want to come down and work on that as well? Yeah, of course, I'll come down. There's a show called LFC down in Kent. Oh yeah. When I worked on there, and that was the night that I met. I'd been introduced beforehand to Sam Amidi, but then I met Sam. That was the first time I met Sam down there as well. Started talking to him. I've turned up in my shirt, trousers. I've got a tie. Do you want me to wear a tie? Oh, no, it's cool. The other people around the cage, like the other officials around the cage, not as smart, but I'd come up and I'd turned up and I'd made a conscious effort to turn up in a shirt with a tie. Yeah. Do you want me to wear the tie?
The vibe so that they want to deliver for the show.
Yeah. So I'm looking smart. I've come to work. I haven't come here just to sit by the cage and just tick a few boxes. Yeah. So me and Sam and Dan started talking more and more. Just started working more with them in the group. They'd phone me up, Mike, we need you to do this. Yeah. And I'd never turn down the show. Me and the wife at the time, we were married at this point. We've got our little baby, and I said to her at that point, I'm never going to turn down the show. Like, if these guys offer me a show, I'm going to do it because I enjoy it. It's my passion. And I was just going around anywhere they wanted me to go. Mike, you've got a show here, do you want to do it? Yes. You've got a show here, do you want to do it? Yes.
And is that just sort of regional, or was that like across the country?
Mainly regional.
Sure.
We'd go out to East Anglia as well. We'd go sometimes across to the south coast or the southwest. But it was mainly the southeast and London region. Until I got a phone call from Sam and he said, Mike, I've got a show. Will you be available the weekend of whatever it was? And I said, oh, what, the Saturday? Yeah, I'm available that Saturday. No, I need you available the weekend. Thinking, shit, like, what's the weekend? What sort of show is this?
It's a lot of fights, mate.
Yeah. What? How big's this show? Yeah. And it turned out it was a show called SFC over in Bulgaria. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So get a phone call doing this. He said, Mike, me and Dan can't make it, but we've got Rich Mitchell, and we've got a few others that are coming across as well. Do you want to go? Yes.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. I said, who are the others? And he rolled off Kev Capel, amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and judoka and former youth boxer as well. Great guy is Kev. You got Neil Hall, the rest his soul. The late great Neil Hall died 2021, something like that. He was a referee for the UFC. He used to cover like the whole of the north of the UK with shows as well. Him and his wife Kath. They used to bring officials through, train them all through, and get them working. Kath still does it now, but obviously Neil's passed away, so she's carrying on his legacy. And a few others as well. So Sasha, Sam's brother, and a couple of other guys as well. So we've all flown over to a couple of cut men were with us as well. The MC has flown out, so there's a gang of us at 6 o'clock in the morning on this Friday morning, Luton Airport. We've all bowled up, and we fly out to Bulgaria, to Sofia.
That's cool.
It was. We stayed in the aptly named Hotel California, which sounds amazing, and you would think from the song title it's such a lovely place, but no, it wasn't. It was a little bit run down. Let's leave it at it was a little bit run down. And Georgi, who was setting up the show for us, he's put us in and miscalculated the amount of rooms that we would need for everybody.
Right.
So Rich and Neil have shared. The rest of us have all been bundled in this other room. And in this room, there's a double bed, a sofa, a chair bed, which I thought had gone out of fashion years ago. And that was about it. And there was like 6 of us sleeping in this room.
It's going to get a bit
it's
cozy.
A bit cozy. Yeah, it's a bit cozy. And I thought, the saving grace, I go into the toilet where the shower is as well. And it looks like this beautiful power shower that's like just sectioned off. I thought, that's going to be great. I turned it on and it pissed out behind the shower, so it wasn't connected properly. I was like, well, we aren't having a shower in that then. Yeah. And there was a bath in there as well. But it was the experience, like it was unbelievable, the experience of this show. We've gone out there and it was just different cultures.
Right.
It was an amazing experience, really, really good experience.
See, that must be one of the really cool things that, like, I think sounds really interesting about that, is get to go to all these places. Like, you see all these different fighters, like, from, like, proper up-and-comers, like, big things all over the world, like, all these different people come in. I mean, even, like, Shock and Awe, I fought on Shock and Awe earlier in the year, I think it was.
Okay.
And there's, like, the dude came from France to fight and things like that, and I was having a chat with him. Like, it's awesome, and you see this, like, hot pot, so it must be really cool, like, again, you're, like, ringside seats.
Yeah.
I know you're working, but...
The big difference is, so depending on what sort of person you are, I try to approach MMA officiating in a different way to certain people do. So I try not to I put to myself, I don't mingle with the fighters at all, because I know some of them from years and years and years, like 13 years of doing this now. I've come across a lot of them, say hello to some of them. I know some of the coaches, I know some of the fighters. But I don't like to, I see it as like a business and pleasure sort of thing.
Yeah.
MMA officiating is my business.
Yeah.
Associating with those people would be a pleasure.
Yeah.
I don't really want to mix the two, because then it could turn out that if I'm officiating one of their fighters, or if I'm officiating their fight, I know that I would call it straight down the ball. Like, this is the criteria, this is what I cover. If their opponent doesn't like, if it was a close fight,
that's a bit controversial.
Their opponent might be, hang on a minute, you was having,
him,
you were saying, like, giving high fives and slapping each other's bum on the way through, like, backstage.
Yeah.
And now you've given it him over me.
Yeah.
And that can put you in a dodgy situation, dodgy scenario in that sort of instance. So that's why I try to avoid that side of it. Because from a judge, it's just easier. I've got two choices. I either have to defend myself, like in that situation, or I just don't put myself in that situation in the first place.
Yeah, fair enough.
I just don't put myself in it. So the fighters, when you say, oh, it's really cool because they're coming from all over and they're doing this, I don't know. Sometimes all I know is their name on a call sheet. And sometimes all they are is red corner, blue corner to me.
Right, yeah.
I've written their names down, but if you were to ask me, oh, what about such and such, the foot on that, I'll go, what fight number and what corner was it? Oh, he was blue corner, fight number 12. And I'll go, oh, was that the Darce stoppage? Yeah, it was. Well, he did this, and this. So I've got no idea what their names are at all.
Interesting, yeah.
But I know I can tell you what they did, I just can't tell you their name.
Because I've often wondered about that, because I know I've heard people talk about it with referees, like how much do they know about the fights? Because, you know, some fighters will have a specific style where you're like, actually, this guy's like, he's really, like, he takes a lot of damage in his fights or whatever, but like keeps going. It's like, oh, actually, then should you arguably stop that later or earlier or whatever? And I wonder how much like judges know about that as well.
From my perspective, every not only does every bout constitute a new fight, every round constitutes a new fight. because I judge everything on a round by round basis.
Okay.
So you could have we've all seen numerous times over the years, the comeback story.
Yeah.
A kid takes one of the best known ones, I want to say in recent history because I'm a lot older than you, Tom, but Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen.
Yeah.
Anderson Silva gets beat up for the best part of 4.5 rounds.
Yeah.
Well, 4 rounds, 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's it.
much.
That's because that's
And,
what
yeah.
Chael Sonnen famously said.
Yeah. I won 4 of the 5 rounds, therefore I win the fight. Yeah. He comes back with that triangle that wins the bout.
Yeah.
At any point, I'm not saying at any point in that fight it could have been stopped.
Yeah.
But if any point during that fight it had have been stopped, we would have been robbed of that finish.
Yeah.
We would have been robbed of that whole rivalry.
Yeah, that crazy.
That not only sprung Anderson Silva Chael Sonnen rivalry, also contributed towards Vanderlei Silva Chael Sonnen rivalry as well. So if that had been stopped sooner, we may not have seen not only the best rivalry from a trash talker to a mixed martial artist, undefeated Mr. Chael Sonnen himself, but we would have also missed out on car crash television of Vanderlei Silva making himself look like an unhinged animal at times. Yeah. Because he got so wound up with Chael. All he wanted to do was kill him.
Yeah. And we'd have been robbed of the "I can't let you get close to me."
Yeah. You know? How can you get took down by a man in flip flops? You know, like that. You got double legged by a man in flip flops. But all of that, so. But as a referee's perspective, you can't let what's happened in previous fights influence you. Yeah. Because if you were to do that, look at Chuck Liddell. So Chuck Liddell, for a large proportion of his career, had a granite chin. You could hit him with a sledgehammer, and he might drop down and then get back up again. His run of last fights got knocked out every time. Yeah. So the chin can disappear at any time. Yeah. Like you can go from being unstoppable to your brain just switching off. Because your brain has just took too much damage, and all of a sudden it knows to avoid it taking any more damage, it just needs to turn off when this happens. Chuck Liddell went down that route. Yeah. Like all of a sudden he's gone from having a granite jaw or an iron jaw to having a fragile glass jaw, purely because of the amount of damage he'd taken over the years. Yeah. Lifestyle choices might come into that as well. Age might have come into that as well. But at one point he went from being almost unstoppable to being stopped. So as a referee, you can't really look at this guy's really good at taking a lot of damage, because inadvertently, if you let them take more damage that is necessary, you're potentially not only shortening their career, but you're also potentially be shortening their life. Yeah. And drastically reducing their quality of life later in life.
And I suppose as well, the referee's job is ever so slightly different from yours. They're there for the safety, yours is the scoring, right? So they shouldn't be letting it go on more for the fight's sake, if that makes sense.
So a referee, they have 2 jobs. They have predominantly. I'll get told I'm an idiot, and I'll get told I'm wrong by people. But But in my opinion, referees have 2 jobs: to make sure that the fight is being conducted within the rule set, and fighters' safety. Yeah, that's the 2 main parts of they've got to make sure that the fight is happening within the rules that are set out. They also have to make sure that the fighters, not make sure that they're safe, but have their safety in mind. Yeah, because they're never going to be safe.
No, you're in a cage fight.
You've got 2 people in a arena of some sort, and they're fighting. Yeah, something is going to happen. Could happen. Something could happen. But they've got to save them from excessive damage. Yeah. from an amateur point of view, and this is what we always point out to people, you'd have heard it at the rules talk at Shock and Awe when you were there, we're here for your safety. From an amateur point of view, you fought K1 on it, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So from an MMA perspective, we're here for your safety. If we think that you're in a submission, and the submission, from an amateur perspective, if we're in a submission and we think the submission is too tight and we think that you won't get out of it, and we say to you, improve your position, or it could snap on so quick that we have to jump in and save you. We're saving you from yourself.
Yeah.
We don't know that you're double jointed. We don't know that in the gym you got out of the last 25 arm bars you were put in, and you don't mind, I'd rather it snap than whatever. I don't know any of that.
Yeah.
What I do know is, as an amateur, you're not getting paid a lot to fight in this. As an amateur, you should be fighting relatively regular, because the amateur scene, amateur fighters or amateur combatants, that's their learning curve. That's how they learn. That's the whole point of being an amateur, is so you can learn. Either there's two different types of amateur. There's the career amateur that wants to use amateur as a way to get forward in their career. And then there's the social amateur that likes the idea of fighting but doesn't want to go pro.
Yeah,
I just want to fight.
Yeah.
And they might fight a couple of. There's also another one that is known as a can, who just turns up, takes money, and falls over. But that's the sort of thing. Is so we're here for your safety. Like the referees are there for your safety. As a professional, if you decide not to tap to that armbar, it's probably going to snap.
Yeah, fair enough.
Or you're going to have some damage done to that arm.
I know what people want.
Yeah, well, not the referees.
Not the referees.
I don't. That's Tom's opinion. Yeah. That's Tom's opinion. I don't want to see anyone hurt. But you've got two choices. Like Tim Sylvia, you either tap or your forearm's going to snap. Numerous different fighters over the years. Big Nog, you're either going to tap from a Kimura or your upper arm is going to break.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, that's on you. But from an amateur perspective, if we think you're taking too much if we think that the bout is too uneven, we'd even think about stopping it. Yeah. Because, well, what's the point in letting you carry on? So from a K1 perspective, you fought K1, you would have been told in the rules meeting, we always score it we call it K1, hybrid kickboxing, whatever you want to call it. Any shows that I work on that I have anything to do with the rules on it, I'll always say to people, from a K1 we score and we referee it under glory rules. Yeah. Glory is K1 is like the Eastern, that's the Eastern rule set. Glory is the Westerners equivalent to K1. Yeah. And so that's what we score it under, the glory criteria. And in that, if you get knocked down 3 times in a round, it's over. If you get knocked down 4 times in a whole fight, it's over. Oh yeah. So it's either 3 times in a round, 4 times in a fight. Or you could get knocked down once in the first round and the ref goes, you know what, you're not on each other's level. We can't have this because you're in danger. Like to yourself and to someone, and to yourself and to all your friends and family, you're in danger. We're going to call this a bit early. It doesn't happen a lot, but every once in a while it can happen.
And that's the thing, like you say, with amateurs, I've always been a big believer in that, because people often say like, oh, it's too, like, people jump in too early or whatever. But at the end of the day, like you say, it's an amateur. It's like, what do you care about? You're not putting like, why putting your life on the line? But you're not going to go pro. You're not about to be some world champ. You're just like some guy that is having a go at it, and maybe you want to keep going, but who really gives a fuck? No one really minds.
Why don't you, if you want to be a warrior, come back again in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
We've just saved you from a concussion.
Yeah.
You can now fight again in 4 weeks' time.
Instead of 6 months.
Yeah. Like an amateur MMA fighter, you get your arm snapped. You could be a 19-year-old labourer on site. You get your arm snapped, or you get
like you've got to turn up to work the next day.
Yeah. You like, this is Saturday night. You've got to try and go to work Monday. You might not be able to drive your car. You might not be able to, when you get there, you might not be able to, if you're a labourer or you're doing a skilled manual labour job, you might not be able to move your arm. So how are you going to continue? How are you going to provide to your family if you can't perform those duties? And that's the difference between amateur and pro. And your amateur record does count. Your amateur record does count. But don't put your life at risk for your amateur record. Yeah. It's amateur for a reason. Yeah. But Tom, you asked me a question right at the start. and I've gone off on a tangent. You asked me.
So do you know what I did? I don't even know what I asked you now.
So you asked me about the rules. So who sets the rules?
Oh,
yeah. So
yes.
So there's
about the ref and the
yeah. So there is.
Glad you brought it back. I'm glad someone's steering this thing.
So we've got the. Jesus Christ! Now you've thrown me. So ABC set the unified rules of mixed martial arts.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So most places will use the unified rules of mixed martial arts. In the Far East, they use a slightly varied rule set on it.
Is that like where one championships have different rules and things? Yeah.
So one championships, they don't let you elbow to the head, or Pride rules was you can't elbow to the head.
Yeah. Same as
on
PFL
the floor
until recently, I think.
No, that's something different. We'll go over that slightly different. So Pride was you couldn't elbow somebody on the floor. I don't think you could have used elbows at all. But you could knee and kick to the head of a down opponent.
Soccer kick and stuff. Yeah.
Where it's vice versa. In the Western world, you can elbow, but you can't knee or kick to the head of a down opponent. The reason being, in Japan, in the Far East, and that sort of side of it, if you get kicked in the head and you get knocked out, the fight's over. More than likely, you'll get up, you'll have a headache, probably a concussion, but you'll be good to go again in 4 weeks' time.
Yeah.
However long it was. If you get elbowed and you get a great big cut, you then can't fight again until that cut is fully healed.
Yeah.
So that's why in the Far East, they don't like elbows in MMA as much.
Because of the regularity of competition.
Because you might not be able to fight as much. Whereas in America, in the UK, in most of Europe, in South America as well, they'll prefer you to be able to use the elbows and not kick and knee to the head of a down opponent, purely because of the risks involved from concussion point of view.
Yeah,
if you get cut, you get cut.
Damage.
Yes.
Yeah.
The cuts are like it's a flesh wound. It will heal.
Yeah.
Whereas the concussions and everything, they don't like it as much.
I've never.
So if you look at it from that perspective, you've also got so in the States. So in the UK, we'll follow the unified rules of mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
In most of Europe, they'll follow the unified rules of mixed martial arts. In the States, they'll follow the unified rules of mixed martial arts. But the individual commissions, so in the UK, we don't have commissioners, so to speak. English Mixed Martial Arts Association, what I'm part of, we shadow commission and we have some affiliated shows, but we're not a fully fledged commission.
A governing body.
Yeah, we're not a governing body. Whereas in the States, all of the athletic commissions, they can choose whether they take the particular unified rules on or not.
Got it.
So they may turn around and say, actually, so at one point, a downed opponent wasn't one hand on the floor, it was both hands on the floor. You had to have both hands on the floor to be a downed opponent. Some athletic commissions didn't like that, so they said, nope, we're going to stick with one hand on the floor. Others said, we do like that, so we'll have both hands on the floor.
Yeah.
When they took that away again, they were like, well, actually, no, I prefer the two-hand rule or whatever it may be. And it gets a little bit confusing, but that's the whole point of rules talks as well. So the referees will speak to the commissioners, they'll speak to the athletic commission, they'll find out any nuances within the rules itself. There's a plethora of different takes on that as well, and different rules that fall into it, but that is predominantly what the referees and the commissioners will talk about.
Cool. Yeah.
What you're talking about with PFL, so PFL, where they have their seasons, and they have the Europeans. PFL Europe is £100,000 cash prize. PFL worldwide is the £1 million.
One,
They don't allow elbows during the league part, during the season part of it, purely because they don't want people getting cut. Because if you get a bad cut, you then may not be able to fight in a couple of months, because it could take 6 weeks for the cut to heal. But what if we want you fighting again in 3 months' time, 4 months' time, and you've got a great big cut that's going to take ages to heal or anything like that? So they take it out of it. Also, some MMA. So when you've got cage warriors who've got a prize fighter, they won't allow cut elbows, or they'll say to them, you can't elbow in the semi-finals, because if you get cut too bad in the semi-final earlier on in the show, you then can't fight in the final. So there's variations, and there's slight
for scheduling.
Yeah.
So is that then just dictated by the organisation rather than?
So in the States, it's by the commission. In the UK, it's by the promoter or the organisation.
Okay.
The rest of Europe, it will be the promoter or the organisation as well. They can all.
So they choose whether to follow.
The
unified rules as.
If we're organising officials for anything in the UK, we follow the unified rules of mixed martial arts. We don't follow anything else. We've got quite strict rule sets for kids as well. So there's specific bits that can happen for kids, like certain age groups, no headshots. Certain age groups.
I think they use like chest guards and things sometimes, don't they? Or is that? I might be thinking kickboxing.
That would be more kickboxing and Muay Thai and boxing. They'll do that as well. Whereas in MMA you wouldn't, because that takes away the grappling concept. But like no strikes to the head of a ground opponent. Like certain age groups, there's no strikes to the head at all. Other age groups, there's no strikes to the head of a ground opponent. No leg attacks or whatever it may be. So there'll be slightly hybrid rules for kids.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just to preserve.
They've got a lot of growing and development to do. You don't want to do that all twisted up.
Yeah, exactly. So that gets you to from a criteria point of view, or a rule set point of view, what comes into that.
And then, so what about the one championship ones? Because they've got unique rule sets where they allow the knees.
I've got too much going on in my head, Tom. I've got no idea.
Sorry.
So that's it's knees to the head.
Yeah, because I think they have elbows as well, but they have knees to ground the opponent.
But again, that's their own.
That's just an organisational thing.
Yeah, it's an organisational thing. You've got to remember that it's a Thai organisation. So.
Yeah, I think they mainly do it in Thailand and Singapore, I think, from memory. No, Singapore.
I can't
remember
really.
Off the top of my head. Yeah.
We discussed this like before we came, started recording, Tom. I'm not very good at current affairs in MMA, so I've got too much going on in my head.
It's funny, you're absolutely right. Like you say, there's so much going on, and you've got to keep up on the rules here and rules that, and then you've got your life outside of that. It's a lot.
I've got a full-time job that I'm away a couple of 3 nights a week. I've got a young family. I've got my own training to do as well.
That's it.
From a martial arts point of view.
And are you still saying yes to every show you can get? Is that rule still going?
Not every show. Some of them have gone by the wayside.
You can have a breather now from time to time.
You say that, like this year, I've had a couple of shows cancelled on me. So what I really like about my MMA officiating career today, I call them my family. I've got a family of MMA officials that I'm working with on a regular basis. I've got some shows that I've been working with now for like so long that they are a family as well. So like the promoters, the people that work on it, the cut men, the runners, the commissioners, the water boy, anybody else, those people, they're my family. And then like, so I might do last year I think I did 28 shows or 28 days of officiating. This year I've had a few cancellations this year, so I'm probably on like 19. But it all depends what it is and what's going on. So there is some shows that I've cancelled, that I've pulled back from. Mainly nothing more than the fact that I'm trying to bring other officials through. There's going to be a time that I'm not working on certain shows anymore. So I need to make sure that show has got the best available officials to work on it. There's only a finite number of officials I can have on the show. There's only, I might have 15 people in our pool of officials. So Dan Mohidi, Sam Amidi and I, we have a pool of officials that we work with. Dan and Sam work with Marc Godard very closely to help train officials. So they'll help him organise his referee and official courses. So he'll do a weekend course now. So it's a Saturday and a Sunday. various places around the country. He's done some in Wales. He does them all over the world as well, in different parts of the world. But when Dan and Sam help him organise them in the UK, we then have a pool of officials. So there might be 20 people on that course. Some of them might be coaches, some of them might be fighters, some of them may be from different walks of life. Some of them might just be fans that want to learn more about officiating.
Yeah.
But they'll go on that course. Some of them will come away from that course and they'll be like, right, I've got this bit of paper that tells me I'm an official.
Yeah.
It could be a national license, which will be an EMA, or I say a license. It could be an EMA certification. It could be when he did the one in Wales, it was a MMA Cymru certification. Or he could provide them with an ABC certification, which would be a global certification for it.
Okay.
He provides them with that certification, but that's like passing your driving test.
Right. Yeah.
So when you think about
I mean, you're a good driver.
Yeah. Just because you can pass the course doesn't mean that you're automatically a good official.
Yeah.
So I know people that have been on that course. They've been officiating that are good officials that have officiated for a number of years, done Marc's course, failed. Like when I say failed, they might have frozen in the moment. They might have, something has happened. And rather than getting their ABC certificate, they've got an EMA certificate, which isn't bad. They've still got a national certification to say that they are of a certain level.
Yeah.
There's other people that had barely picked up the black gloves ever, barely picked up a pen to judge a fight. They may be really good at the theoretical side of everything. They've passed, the pass mark is here. They've hit that pass mark. They've done everything in that snapshot in time. They've done everything correct that Marc has thrown at them in the practical, in the theoretical side of it. So he goes, they've hit these pass marks. There's your ABC certificate.
Yeah.
When they get into the real world, as we know with drivers, some people who barely passed their driving test could be the best drivers in the world. Some people that get absolutely no minors at all.
No flaws.
Yeah, no flaws in their driving test are horrendous.
Yeah.
Like
the moment they're on their ones.
Yeah. They can't drive on a motorway. They have to drive this. Oh my gosh, it's raining. It's a bit too dark. It's whatever. So it's a snapshot in time that Marc has to take. That's the bit that he sees you, and he has to assess you on that snapshot in time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's passing your driving test. At that moment onwards, you need to go out and you need to get experience. Sure. But you also need to get the right experience, because there's too many shows out there at the minute that it's getting better. It is getting better. Like when I first started 2011, it was like the Wild West. Yeah, you had, and before that, like the early to mid 2000s, it was horrendous. It wasn't like the Wild West. It was the Wild West.
Sure, yeah.
But we still have it now. Like you could turn up to a show and there could be a referee refereeing 25 fights themselves. There could be 3 judges sitting around that, and none of them judges have ever even picked up the criteria.
Right, yeah.
But they're just mates of the promoter.
Yeah, I watch a bit of MMA.
Yeah. He trains at the gym. He's all right.
Yeah.
He's a BJJ black belt. He knows MMA.
That all over again,
Yeah. Or he's a high-level grappler of some sort, or he's a kickboxer, or he does this. He knows MMA. They may know the moves, but they may not know the criteria and how to score it.
Yeah.
And it's not only do you need to know the criteria of how to score an MMA event or the rules to ref an MMA bout, you also need to know how to put that into practice. So it's the actual application of that itself.
Yeah.
It's the nuances that fall into it.
I guess weird scenarios that pop up that you wouldn't anticipate.
Yeah. When a bout finishes, if it's a 3-round bout and there's a accidental foul or an intentional foul in the final round, so the third of a 3-round fight, that actually can go to the scorecards if they're not disqualified.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, and it can go to the scorecards. But people don't. They're like, oh, really? But the fight hasn't finished. So if it's in the second round of a 2-round fight, it's either going to be a no contest or a disqualification, depending on what the referee decides. If it's in the third round of a 3-round fight, or if it's in the 4th or 5th round of a 5-round fight, it can then go to the scorecards.
4th or 5th?
4th or 5th.
Oh, cool.
So more than half of the fight has to have been completed.
Right, okay.
So in a 3-round fight, round 1 and 2. In a 5-round fight, round 1, 2, and 3 needs to be completed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it could be in a 4th round, could be in the 5th round.
Huh.
It then goes to a technical decision. And this is what throws people out quite a lot. So the big difference, the difference between a technical and a decision is whether the referee has had to step in or not.
Oh, okay.
So a KO and a TKO.
That's what defines it.
Yeah. So there's Marc told me this a couple of years ago, or reaffirmed it for me. He didn't tell me it, he reaffirmed it for me. There's only 2 ways that a KO can happen. There's only two ways that a KO can happen. The first one is you get punched in the head and you get knocked out.
Yeah.
The second one is actually a body shot. So if you get punched in the liver and you go down, that's a KO. Because it's your body involuntary going out.
Yeah.
It's your body shutting down.
Driving.
Yeah. If you've took leg kicks,
Yeah.
and you decide and you can't carry on, that's a TKO.
Yeah.
Because it's not involuntary, it's built up over time.
Yeah, leg kick knockouts and stuff,
But also with a submission, if the referee has to intervene, so if you get choked unconscious, it's a technical submission.
Oh, so
Because
even
the
if
referee
I
has
went
intervened.
unconscious in that and the ref has pulled it off rather than I've tapped.
If you tap, it's submission.
Okay.
If the referee has to stop it, it's a technical submission.
I suppose by definition, submission is me going, oh, I admit it, you've beaten me. Whereas I haven't done that, I've just got to sleep.
Yeah. Again, ground and pound, 9 times out of 10 is a technical knockout.
Of course, yeah.
Because the referee has stepped in. Same as your decisions. So you've got a technical decision, which is the fight hasn't finished its full course, but it's been stopped. And more than half of the fight has been fully completed. So 3rd of a 3-round fight, 4th or 5th of a 5-round fight.
And would that be the same for you're talking about like with amateur fights, if you saw a real big mismatch, if the ref stepped in and was like, oh, do you know what? Fuck this, this isn't fair. That would be a technical decision.
Technical knockout.
Oh, technical knockout.
Because a technical decision is only when it goes to a decision.
Oh, okay.
Technical knockout is if you stand in and you call it off. Technical knockout, refs call it off.
Okay, fine.
But then also, and then when you look at decisions, it's all the different types of decisions as well, because depending on how the judges have scored it, whether it goes to a unanimous, split, or a majority.
Yeah.
So it's brilliant when you get people that don't understand it, trying to put their tuppence in.
Yeah.
That was a split decision. Was it a split decision or was it a majority decision?
Yeah, I've never quite understood the difference between the two fully.
So
I don't know if I've opened a can of worms there.
It's beautiful. Okay. And I need to choose my words carefully to make sure I don't get it wrong. So if you were to look at a draw, for instance sake, a draw would be all 3 officials scoring a draw for the same fighter.
Yeah.
That would be a draw. A split draw could be one going one way, one going the other way, one scoring a draw. That's a split draw because you've got both scoring a winner and
a neutral one.
And a neutral one. A majority draw is if 2 call it a draw and 1 calls it a win either way, because the majority of the officials have scored it a draw.
Said it's a draw, okay.
Yeah, so, and then there's different variations of it that fall in there. So it is only a draw, a majority draw, or a split draw.
Okay.
But you've got to know what the differences are. So when the MC comes over to you, so there's a couple of MCs that are extremely good and extremely knowledgeable. Ricky Wright, really, really good pal of mine. He's extremely knowledgeable when it comes to decisions.
He gets it, yeah.
He's a student of combat sports. definitely a student of MMA, loves MMA. So he'll come out and he'll look at it and he'll often be telling the head commissioner or head judge or head official or whoever it is, oh no, that was a X or that was a Y. You get other MCs that just walk over and go, what happened there?
Yeah.
And they have no idea because they have a microphone, they have a suit, and they will
a loud voice.
If you write it down, it's like Ron Burgundy. If you if it's on the script, that's what I'm calling. They'll just do it. And sometimes you say something to an MC and it's really funny because you'll say something to an MC and they'll be like, are you sure? Yeah, that's it. That's what it's called. So you'll tell them, especially like it could be a boxing MC has done an MMA show.
Yeah.
They've got no idea, absolutely no idea about what the submission was.
And
a couple of times I had it. So I remember the first time Ricky, I always say this to Ricky. So Ricky didn't believe me. There was years and years and years ago, there was a mother's milk submission on the shock and awe. Ricky's come over to me and I've gone, oh, that was a mother's milk. Fuck off, Mike.
No,
that was a mother's milk.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. Mate, it's a mother's milk. It's not a mother's milk. Ricky, I know what I'm talking about. That was a mother's milk. It wasn't a mother's milk. It was Darren Hessian versus Sam Spokes years and years and years ago. Heavyweight belt. Darren Hessian gets Sam with a mother's milk. And as I say, I can remember very specific things, but then I can't remember something else. Ricky didn't believe me and he announced it via submission. Didn't say what the submission was because he didn't believe me.
Fair enough.
That it was a mother's milk. And subsequently he then found out afterwards it was and went, oh shit. And I have to say to him constantly, dude, like, you bottled it. You didn't trust me, Ricky. We were supposed to be mates and you didn't trust me. So
But so do you have to, strictly speaking, should they be announcing what the submission is? Because sometimes I know they do, sometimes they don't. And I've always wondered, like, why they said, like, for one, it might be, by Anaconda or Rear Naked or whatever. And then others, it's just by submission. It's like, I wonder why it's that.
So sometimes, as an MC, they can announce whatever.
Yeah, I guess.
It's like they can, if you look at when they call out a decision, if it's gone to the scorecards, some will read out scores, some won't.
I always thought that was just for split decisions.
No. Some will always read out scores. All three judges called it 29-28 to the red corner.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah,
right,
so some will read out scores, some won't. From an MC's perspective, when I speak to Ricky and a couple of other MCs about this, Ricky's really good because he understands if it's a busy show, don't read out results.
Yeah.
Don't read out scores. Just read out the result. Whereas Ricky's famous, mainly because I keep repeating it, Ricky's famous for saying that no one gives a fuck what the MC is saying. Yeah. Nobody cares. They don't care what guff he's trying to spill.
Yeah.
They just want the result. Just tell me who's won. Like, was it me or was it him? If it's gone to a decision, was it me or was it you?
Yeah.
Don't care about anything
And I guess
else.
if you've choked someone out, you're like, mate, I know what I've done.
Yeah. So if you've just knocked somebody out and they've got a great big hematoma on the side of their head, it was a close fought contest, and the winner in the red corner, Mr. Blah, and they're like, we already know who's won.
We just watched him pick him up off the floor.
The winner in the red corner in gold shorts with a green trim and yellow boots and pretty eyeliner and the tattoo of a dog on his arm is, no one cares about that. Just tell us who's won. Tell us the decision, confirm the decision if it's been a knockout or a submission. The only time people care is if it's gone to the decision or if something has happened. So it could have been a stoppage, but it could be a disqualification. Was it or wasn't it a low blow? Is it no contest? Is it going to a technical decision? Or what's happened? Like if it's something out of the ordinary that's happened, that's when people care what they're saying. But the rest of the time, people don't like.
Just get on with it.
Yeah, just hurry up. Ricky, I love you, mate, but just hurry up. But some MCs don't understand that. So some MCs will like, so Ricky has, and he's shown me a few times, he's got Andy Sledge was good at this as well. They'll have like 2 or 3 different scripts. So if they're on a show that's got 40 fights, they'll use the short scripts.
Yeah.
If they're on a show that's had loads of pullouts and it's got 8 fights, right, I've got the long
drag
scripts.
that out a bit,
Yeah, we need to, like, so some shows are, let's just motor them through as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
We're on a tight schedule, we've got
Bomb,
TV.
1 out, 1 in.
Yeah, literally just, like, when you fought on Shock and Awe, it's like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Right, you're there, you're gonna walk out at this blah, 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 blah. And you can pretty much know that start to finish, they'll say a finish time, they're gonna finish around that finish time. So we don't have time for you to give us a 5-minute spiel about this fighter's, he hails from, he hails from Hanworth, but he's also spent time in Feltham and Fulham.
Loves and Greg's on a Friday morning.
Yeah, that's it. He had a staple diet of frozen fish and rice cakes or whatever it may have been.
Yeah.
Like some of them will go to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Because they think that this is my time to shine.
Yeah, sure.
There's a hierarchy, in my opinion, there's a hierarchy in MMA shows. You need to have fighters because the fighters bring in the crowd.
Yeah.
And you need to have a crowd because they pay for the fighters. You need to have a good referee because the referee, the difference between a good referee and a bad referee could be the difference between a good fight show and a bad fight show.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because a referee, if they keep making mistakes and bad stuff happens, the fight show gets a bad rep.
Yeah.
If they're the other side of bad and they keep getting in the way and spoiling the flow of a fight, could ruin a very good fight. Judges need to be of a certain ilk.
Yeah.
But it's a lot harder than people think being a judge. A bad MC can ruin a fight, a whole fight show. But the MC is, like, in my opinion, the 2 most important groups of people are the fighters and the crowd.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because without the fighters, there's no show.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah. Without the supporters, without the crowd,
there's also sort of no
there's no one paying. There's very limited people paying for the show. We're not all in Saudi Arabia where it all gets paid for us, or we're not in UFC when they've got the small cards going on where it's the TV revenue that's paying for the fights. In the local independent shows, in the regional shows, the crowd pay the fighters, pay everybody's wages.
Yeah.
And without the fighters and without the crowd, the show won't go on.
Yeah.
So, and when I say the crowd, I don't just mean the physical crowd, I also mean the digital crowd, people that are buying pay-per-views.
Yeah, big time.
So I have arguments with people constantly, don't get in the way of the crowd. Photographers, cameramen, cornermen, other people that are milling about around the cage. Sit down.
Yeah, get to where
Crouch
you're supposed
down.
to be.
Yeah, if you're a cameraman, like, don't stand up in front of the action with your camera, because all you're doing is you're getting in the way of all the people that have paid. There's probably 1,500 quid's worth of money standing behind you trying to watch that fight.
Yeah.
But you want your picture. Yeah. To me, that's quite selfish because all of them people are paying for that moment.
Yeah.
And you're standing and you're blocking it. That's like somebody standing up at the cinema. Yeah. It's not on. Yeah. It just, get out of my way. I want to watch it. And I'm not just digging out cameramen because other people do it as well.
I get it.
But people standing in front of the crowd, like, that crowd's paying our wages.
That's a good pet peeve. I like that.
Yeah, and honestly, it gets right on my fucking wick. Right on my wick. I've lost where I'm going again, Tom. This is what happens when you get...
It's all right, mate.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think we've been over an hour now. So we better wrap up fairly soon anyway.
Well, so what is there anything else you want to know about from an officiating?
No, to be honest, I feel like I learned a boatload from that. Like I didn't even think about, especially with the decisions and stuff, like how the different rule sets. Like that's super interesting. And again, I thought it would be an interesting chat to have because he's obviously like super passionate, super knowledgeable about it. But I think it's something, like you were saying, really does get overlooked. Like people don't realise how much goes into it.
And look, people when they look at an MMA official, like Marc Godard is and a number of others. So I'm going to park Marc because everyone talks about Marc. I've got some MMA official friends who, and not just MMA official, combat sport official friends. They get flown round the world to work on a combat sports event. What people don't see is, so Ben Cartledge works a show in Singapore. He might fly out on a Wednesday, or Australia, works in Australia. What's a 24-hour flight?
Yeah.
He might fly on a Wednesday, might fly Wednesday night, arrives late Thursday night, Friday morning. Has 24 hours to acclimatise, or might fly out on the Thursday, arrive on the Friday. The fight show's on the Saturday.
Yeah.
Flies home on the Sunday. He's back Monday.
That's a long commute, isn't it?
He's had 48 hours worth of flying, so probably the best part of 55 hours worth of travelling.
Yeah.
By the time he's travelled to the airport, from the airport, vice versa, all of that, might have had 50 hours worth of travelling to spend 36 hours in a country or 48 hours in a country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably not see that much of it.
He's got there,
the
he's tired, it's the middle of the night, he's wide awake, he's got to get ready for that show, blah, 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 blah. So last time I I've had a couple of other trips abroad. So in 21 or 2022, one of the 2 years.
Sure, I believe you.
Yeah, one of them, I can't remember. I went to an IMF event in Abu Dhabi.
Nice.
Height of COVID. So I flew in. I had about a gazillion COVID tests. I was allowed one of two places. I was either allowed in the hotel that was under lockdown, or I was allowed at the venue. So I flew in I flew out on the Saturday night our time, landed there wee hours of Sunday morning, got into my hotel, managed to get into the room, had a couple of hours sleep, went down, had dinner, went back upstairs, went down to the bar, had a couple of Coca-Colas, went back to bed. The following morning, 7 o'clock, I'm up, dick about for a little bit, get to the venue for 9 o'clock, have a whole day of MMA officiating, come home, have a shower, have dinner, go to the bar, go to bed, the next day again, the next day again. That's the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The Thursday, Thursday night, we have the MMA awards. So we come home, showered, changed into a suit, go to the MMA awards in the evening. Friday is a daytime piece again. The Saturday is an evening. But we did nothing. I thought, you got to spend the week in Abu Dhabi. It must have been amazing. Dude, I didn't see anything other than my hotel and the arena. I went to a couple of months back. I was at PFL Glasgow. I landed at midnight on the Friday night. I got up on the Saturday morning, trained on the Saturday morning, went to the airport because we were staying across the road from the airport. Went to the airport, grabbed some lunch, went back, had a little sleep, got up, went to the arena for the evening, had one drink when we got back from the show. 8:25 on the Sunday morning, I'm flying home from Glasgow. So everyone says, this is amazing. You've got to see, you've got flown to Glasgow and you've been at PFL. It was an amazing experience. Had about 12 hours on the ground without anything to do. Yeah. And I was at the airport as well. I was at Glasgow airport. Yet then the second time we went to Bulgaria, it was me, Sam, Dan, a couple of others were all there, Sasha, a couple of others. We We flew in on the Friday. All down the Saturday, we had stuff to do. We went to a shooting range. We did this. We
cool.
did that.
It's a proper trip.
We had a proper trip. Like, it was amazing. Like, all the stuff we got up to. When I went to KSW in Poland, met a guy called Nick Skund. Me and Nick, we ended up on the Saturday. We went for a walk. We were sharing a room. We went for a walk around Warsaw. Like, spent about 5 hours walking around Warsaw,
cool.
like seeing the sights and sounds. So sometimes. It's amazing. Went to Belfast, ended up going to a Bill McCann wrestling seminar on the Saturday. Brilliant, like that was an amazing experience. Other times, like I'm doing Fight Star this weekend, John's picking me up because there's not a lot of parking there at the O2. John's picking me up about midday. We're driving to the O2. I'll go and get a coffee whilst he starts wrapping hands. I'll get all the schedules sorted out for the officials. I'll then do the show. And then me and John will drive back to my house afterwards. He'll then carry on down to Bournemouth. Yeah, and that's it. And there's nothing else in between. So
not as sexy as some of the others.
Yeah. Everyone, and the thing is, everyone wants to be an MMA official at the UFC. Everybody wants to be at Las Vegas or Madison Square Garden or Yas Island or wherever it may be. Everyone wants to, like, they're back at the O2 in March. Everyone wants to be at the hotel, sitting there in their suit or in the cage saying fight or whatever it may be. What they don't want to do, and this takes me back to when people get their certification and think that they're an MMA official, they don't understand that I know some referees that have been refereeing for 15 plus years, 15 to 20 years they've been refereeing, and they've never got outside of their regional shows.
Right, yeah.
I know other officials that have been officiating for 4 or 5 years and made it to the large national shows or the large European shows. Yeah. It all depends who you are, the path you decide to take, the decisions you make along the way, not only from an officiating perspective, but also outside of it, the decisions you decide to make and take. If you follow the right path, if you turn up and there's a promoter that wants you to referee a 150 kilo man versus a 60 kilo woman, like, that's an extreme, but dude, say no.
Yeah.
Like, if something goes against your moral compass, don't do a show just because you've turned up. If you turn up and the medical cover isn't right, if you turn up and there's not the correct amount of officials, if you turn up and there's heavily mismatched fights, if you turn up and they've had 17 pullouts overnight and they've got a load of cans that are just going to turn up and fall over, just because you've refereed somebody that fell over in 20 seconds, and I don't mean they got knocked out in 20 seconds and it was an even fight.
They just gave up.
Yeah. I'm not talking Ben Askren versus Jorge Masvidal, where it's just a flying knee and it's 8 seconds, it's over. Yeah. Like, I'm talking if the guy's walked up, he's thrown 3 jabs and the other guy's fallen over and just curled up into a ball because he's got another fight to go to in an hour. Like, you don't have to do it. Yeah. Choose the right path. Put your stake in the ground. If you want to do them fights, go for it. But I've refereed 500 fights. Yeah, but 480 of them fell over. Yeah. Like, it wasn't a real fight, was it? It was a fix from the word go. They've got matey in, and they've brought him from wherever they've brought him in. They've had to pay him 500 quid because he's up against the ticket seller. Yeah. And if the ticket seller pulls out, he's going to take 200 tickets with him. We need someone just to fill in. Yeah. If you don't want to work that show, if you think that's unethical,
don't be afraid to say no.
Yeah, don't be like, other officials will look at you better for saying no than saying yes, because they'll go, they just let anything happen. They just let the promoters do what they want. They had 2 St John's Ambulance first aiders, like, that have done their work, 1-day first aid emergency course as the medics, rather than having doctors, paramedics, trauma room people. Yeah, 100%. And it's the same as the officials. Like, as a coach, if you're letting your fighters constantly fight on a show that's got bad officials, like, you're either putting false hope into your fighter because they've ended up fighting a can, and then all of a sudden the first time they fight a real fighter, they get smashed to pieces. Or your fighter's going out there, dropping someone after 20 seconds, jumping on the top of the cage, asking for Dana to give him that strap.
Yeah.
Where realistically, that guy that he's just dropped in 20 seconds is 0-70.
Yeah.
And none of his fights have got outside of the first 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like there's something. That's my soapbox, and I'll stand on it.
Good.
But
Good moral stance.
But yeah, that's it. Like as an official, more than anything else, get your morals in the right place. Because without that, that's the only thing you can fall back on. If you make some dodgy decisions whilst you're cage side, like that can be forgiven if you've got an opinion as to why you've given that decision.
Sure, yeah, you can.
If you can justify that decision, it's not always going to be good, but if you can justify it, you can justify it.
Yeah.
But if you can't justify it, you'll be looked on much better if you can justify your decision than if you can't justify your action.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that's
my final thoughts, Tom.
That's a beautiful moral stance to take by the end. Right, I really appreciate all the insight, the knowledge, and taking your time to sit down with me.
No worries, bro.
Much appreciated.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. As you can probably tell, Mike is a true expert in this field. I found that a really interesting conversation. Hopefully you did too. Please make sure to support Mike in the description box below on whatever platform you're listening to. I've put his details, so do drop him a follow. And while you're at it, please make sure you subscribe to Conversations with a Martial Artist to keep yourself posted for the next ones. Thank you very much for your time. I'll see you on the next one.